So first of all, let's pour some beer in the glasses. So,
Can't talk without beer.
yeah. So there you have it.
That's fine. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Nice color.
Thank you very much.
It smells like beer.
It smells like beer. Okay, so we're in the right path here.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, let's propose a toast for the beginning of the chat, of the conversation.
Saúde.
Saúde. Cheers, my friend. Yeah.
Good.
So, let me introduce yourself. Can I?
Absolutely.
I will make it in Portuguese in the first, and after I continue in English. Olá, malta! Tudo bem com vocês? Vitor Hugo Meirelles, sommelier de cervejas aqui, e vamos iniciar o nosso segundo episódio do Conversa aos Pairings, hoje com uma pessoa muito importante, muito especial também, que é o Pete Slosberg, que foi um dos pioneiros da Craft Beer Revolution nos Estados Unidos, na Califórnia. E pronto, tá aqui hoje na Nortada para fazer um projeto, e ele vai falar um bocadinho mais para frente. Então, a partir de agora, vamos falar em inglês e é isso, tá bem? Um abraço e vamos à conversa. So, Pete.
I understood a couple of the words.
A couple of the words, yeah. You were in Brazil sometimes, and okay, I think Portuguese, and my Portuguese is from Brazil, not from Portugal. Maybe it's a little bit more familiar for you. But first of all, it's a great honor. Once again, I will tell you about this because it's really a great honor when we are face to face with a guy that you were only reading in the internet or in the books or something like that about beer culture and American beer tradition and the craft beer revolution, and meet them personally.
Don't believe everything you read.
Yeah, okay. But about all the things about beer, and it's very impressive how you do everything. So thank you once again for being with us. And we're going to try to start just a little bit about, just a hint about the beginning of the brewing process in the United States and the 80s and the craft beer revolution and your role on the thing. And after we talk about the innovations and everything.
Okay, sure. Well, the history of beer in the U.S. is kind of convoluted in that in the 1800s, there were probably 5,000 breweries around the U.S. Most of them were local, within villages or cities. But as the bigger companies got bigger, they were able to undersell the smaller guys. Then we also had something called Prohibition.
Yep.
In 1919, they prohibited alcohol, so everything disappeared. And when Prohibition ended in 1933, companies started coming back. Also, people's tastes changed.
Okay.
Especially around World War II, as you had limits on what you could buy because of the war effort. You didn't have all the ingredients you wanted, so the beers became lighter, paler, less flavor.
Okay.
And the bigger guys got bigger by getting scale, making it cheaper to produce, and consumers were getting more and more into this lighter beer. And the competition of the big guys versus the little guys forced a lot of them, little guys out of business. So beers got more industrial, more lowest common denominator, lower flavor, lower color, all that. So by the 1970s, there were only about 50 breweries left in the U.S.
Whoa.
From thousands down to under 100.
Yeah.
And the big guys kept getting bigger.
Yeah.
And ultimately, 3 breweries dominated about 80% of the business.
Okay.
Okay, so what were the choices for somebody? You either got a yellow fizzy beer from number 1, a yellow fizzy beer from number 2, or possibly imports.
Okay.
Certainly Mexican, European, Japanese imports. Now, one company that exists today that survived through Prohibition was Anchor Brewing Company in San Francisco.
Perfect. Maytag.
Fritz Maytag bought it in 1965, but it existed for 100 years
Okay.
And Fritz took it over, really did a great job of building it and building a great reputation for the beers. So he was kind of the first craft brewery, but they existed for 100 years. Now the real first craft brewery started in California. It's called New Albion, and they started in 1977. So a home brewer was in the Navy in Europe, in England, liked the English beers, decided to open a brewery in Sonoma, California, New Albion. And that was kind of the start of the beer revolution. Now, coincident with New Albion opening is the US government in 77 legalized home brewing.
Yeah.
People home brewed, but it was, quote, illegal, not that the government enforced it, but home brewing became legal in 1977. I moved to California in 79, and I didn't drink alcohol, didn't like alcohol. I didn't drink alcohol until I met my wife. She drove me to drink.
Okay.
And when I started with beer, and when we moved to California, I started with wine.
With wine, yeah.
When we moved to California, we're close to the vineyards, Napa and Sonoma.
Yeah.
I decided to home wine make, got equipment, got grapes, and made a Cabernet Sauvignon. In 1979. But when I made it and put it in bottles, I realized I have to wait 3 years. I didn't want to wait. The store said you can make white wine in a year. I like white wine, but don't want to wait. And they said you can make beer in a month. But I didn't like beer then.
Okay.
Because my experience with beer was industrial beer, and I didn't like the flavor of industrial beer.
Okay.
But the home brew store said, try it. I tried it, and I fell in love with home brew. And I wondered, why do I like home brew versus the commercial beer? And the reality is, and I'm not sure this exists in Portugal, but around Europe, there's a candy for kids called Maltesers.
Maltesers, yeah, we have.
Okay, we have an equivalent in the US, and that was my favorite candy as a kid.
Yeah.
And when the home brew I made tasted like the Malteser, the inside,
Okay.
because the middle of a Malteser is malt.
Okay.
Beer malt.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, in theory, beer malt. It's mostly chemicals, but when I tasted beer with 100% barley malt, it reminded me of my favorite candy, so I got into home brewing. And I home brewed. I worked for a company in Silicon Valley, and I started a home brew club there. Now, a friend of mine that I worked with started bugging me to leave working for a big company and start our own company. And I actually liked my job. I knew nothing about starting a company. And I told him no. For 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. And after 2 years...
He was persistent.
Yes. And after 2 years, I thought, okay, it doesn't hurt to talk about it. So I finally sat down with my friend. His name is Mark. And I told Mark, I'll talk about starting a company with you, but I don't want to talk about the product. I want to talk about the company. Let's see if we can come up with some objectives for the company. And if we agree, then we can always take the next step. If we don't agree on the objectives of the company, then fine. So we sat down, and I have to laugh. We met at a delicatessen halfway between where he worked and where I worked.
Okay.
And it was called the Jew and the Gentile.
Okay.
And it was great for a Jew and a Gentile to meet at the Jew and the Gentile. I thought it was appropriate.
Okay.
And we came up with 3 goals of the company. And the goals were, number one, the product. We didn't even talk about beer. The product had to be world class. We're not going to do some common thing.
Okay.
The next thing was, in the world of business, you kind of have 2 choices. Do you get involved with something brand new at the beginning, or do you go into a crowded field, a business environment that exists, and you'll be one of many?
Struggling with.
You can go either way. And when we talked about it, one of the key things we talked about was it's a business, and there are no guarantees in the business. So we need to make decisions based on probabilities of success.
Okay.
And we thought if we're two smart people, we'd probably have a higher probability of success if we go into a new industry rather than in a field with many, many, many competitors. It's just there were more people to compete against. So we decided the number 2 goal was we're going to get involved. We're going to get involved in the ground floor of a new industry.
Perfect.
As a goal.
Okay.
Again, we didn't talk about beer.
Okay.
And the third one was neither one of us had a marketing background. My background was in engineering, and Mark's was in systems. So we, you've heard the term a brand story. I mean, we didn't know how to develop a brand story, but effectively our third goal became our brand story.
Okay.
And the third goal was we'll treat the product with reverence, but everything else with irreverence. If we're going to do this and spend all the time, let's make a great product, but shit, let's have some fun with this. And
yeah,
yeah. So once we got to those 3 goals, I said, okay, great. Now let's continue the conversation. And again, back to there are no guarantees of success. I always like to say it's better to be lucky than smart.
Okay.
And sometimes things happen where it comes out of the blue and it helps.
Okay.
So I was a home brewer. I had the homebrew club at the company I was at. And during these discussions, I got some ribbons for my homebrew in a state competition.
Okay.
My partner, Mark, has never had alcohol to this day. It's just a lifestyle decision. He decided never to have alcohol. So he asked me what goes on at a beer competition. I told him, and then it made him think. He said, well, I've heard there were some small beer companies around. And I said, yeah, Anchor Brewing, Sierra Nevada, Sam Adams, Red Hook. Mm-hmm. Small number are out there. And Mark said, I don't drink, so do people like these new beers versus the industrial beers? And I said, yeah, if you can find them, but they're hard to find.
Okay, yeah.
So he said, interesting, a new business. This may be a possible new business. So we did a little homework, and the beer market in the US is big. It's $100 billion at retail per year, but it's been $100 billion for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. It goes up a little, it goes down a little, but it doesn't really change.
Okay.
And we thought, why would we want to go into a business that isn't growing?
Okay.
But the more research we did, we found that nobody talks about the beer business in total. They talk about segments of the beer industry. So like Budweiser, that's in a segment called premium beer. And you'll see statistics on the size of premium beer and whether it's growing or not. And then Budweiser has another product called Michelob, which is a step up. That's in a category called super premium.
Okay.
And then you have sub-premium, light beer, imports. You have all these subcategories, and some were going up, some were going down. Most were going nowhere.
Okay.
Imports were going up, and then a tiny new category showed up called micro beer.
Micro beer, okay.
The term craft beer is much later.
Okay.
And we saw that in a $100 billion a year business, one segment, micro beer, was $25 million a year at retail to the customer.
It was what year? 2018?
This was
86?
85, 80,
80,
85.
85,
Yeah.
okay, so just to, okay.
So only 25 million, but growing at 50% a year.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we looked at each other and we said, this might be it. So we also thought, if our goal was to treat the product with reverence, but everything else with irreverence, if you don't have fun with beer, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So we thought this might be our opportunity.
Yeah.
So we talked about more things. And the reality is, when you talk about a lot of potential issues in the beginning and come up with a plan, it does two things. It makes you prepared, but it also, if you have a partner, it makes you talk about things and get a solution so you're both on the same page.
Yeah.
Over time, so many of the breweries I know, the partners get into fights and it either destroys the company or sets the company back. But by talking about a lot of these issues up front, it really helped us with our company. So, okay, what are some examples? One of the first examples is, why are we doing this? What are we doing it for? Are we going to make a company, a brewery, that we pass on to the next generation, or are we willing to entertain an offer? There's no guarantee that you're going to get an offer, but we talked about it up front, and we both agreed if we're lucky enough to get an offer, we'll consider it. Mm-hmm. We're not going to say no. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Some of my friends, they never talk about it, and when an offer comes in, they have big battles, mm-hmm. and it's sad to see the friendships disappear.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about it ahead of time. We also talked about things like, do you want to be a local company, or a regional company, or a national company? Now, the scope of the U.S. versus Portugal is a little bit different, but the issues are the same. You can be local in Portugal, or regional, or national.
Yeah.
And the way you approach going to the market is actually different. Mm-hmm. So you need to address what your goal is and put your plan together to achieve that goal. Yeah. We wanted to be a national company from the very beginning. We didn't know how to do it, but it made us think about what are the pieces you have to put together. Another question, and this was a key philosophical question, and you people out there, be prepared. And it's really important. In English, the question is, would you rather be a large owner of a small business or a small owner of a large business? So what the hell does that mean? It's a philosophical question. A lot of people, when they start something, a project, a company or a project, they want to control it all. And by controlling it all, you limit outside people, outside investors, outside employees that bring other expertise. So if you're a control freak, you'll probably be a large owner of a smaller company because you don't have the skills to make the smaller company bigger. The opposite is, if you're willing to bring in investors that not only have money but maybe expertise in different business fields, as well as employees that know other things, you'll probably have a higher probability of succeeding. So philosophically, from the beginning, we were full believers in we're okay with being small owners of a large company, and that set us on a path. We decided it's okay to have investors. We got great investors. It's okay to bring in employees who know shit that we don't, because we don't know it all, and that all helped. We even decided, we kept our day jobs for a year, and the product, the marketing, everything was positive except for the sales. We didn't know the beer business, and we were doing it part-time, but we didn't let our egos get in the way. One night we decided, Mark, do you want to be president? Pete, do you want to be president? And we both agreed, neither one of us, even though we might be smart, we don't know the beer business, and there's something called the learning curve. If you don't know something, it's going to take you time to learn it.
Yep.
And we're believers in time is money in a small company, because you're going to run out of money.
Yep.
So we made the decision that night that it's okay for us to go outside to hire somebody from the beer business who knows what the heck they're doing to be president. We let our egos get out of the way.
Okay. And
we brought in somebody to be our operating president. We were still on the board of directors. We were the board of directors.
Yeah.
I was still involved in the marketing of the product, but I didn't know day-to-day beer operations.
Okay. Okay.
So these are things we considered up front and kind of got us on a trajectory. I don't want to bore you with more of the details, but by taking this philosophy of bringing other people in to help and money, we only started the company with $20,000.
20,000.
Yeah, only $20,000.
Only 20,000. Okay.
Right. Now we had to raise money 5 times. We ultimately raised 1.5 million, but we started small to prove the project and
bring investors.
Right. And
okay.
We ended up having, not that everybody out there will understand the numbers, but we got to 500,000 hectoliters in our 10th year. We grew over 100% a year, for 10 years.
Wow, this is amazing.
So
this is really amazing.
We were lucky, but we thought through a lot of the issues and we tried to put things together to get that kind of growth. So we had fun, and anytime we had to do something outside of the beer, if it wasn't fun or attitudinal, we wouldn't do it.
Okay.
So
yeah, so we're talking about so it was 86 that started the first one. That was Pete's Wicked Ale.
Right.
It was the first American brown ale.
Oh, yeah, only one beer to start. We wanted to prove the concept.
Yeah. So just to the people to know, is elected, or it's we say that the Pete's Wicked Ale was the first American brown ale of all.
Right. So since Mark didn't drink, he left the beers up to me. And my favorite beer at the time was a beer from Northern England called Samuel Smith's Nut Brown Ale. My favorite beer.
Yeah.
I love the malt. I like malt.
Yeah.
It's a great malty beer. But I decided for the beer I wanted to sell, I started adding hops to it. More IBUs, more dry. We were dry hopping before many people were dry hopping.
Okay.
And it took four tries to get to the beer I wanted. And in some respects, I like to say I was trying to copy Samuel Smith's Nut Brown Ale, but with a twist. And I like to say we had 4 failures, but the 4th failure was my favorite beer.
Okay.
And because of the addition of hops for the IBUs and the addition of hops with dry hopping, the success of Pete's Wicked Ale gave the judging community a reason to start a new category, a new type of beer.
Yeah, like the English brown ale with a little bit more hoppiness.
Right.
And the hops from the US.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so they invented the style American brown ale versus English brown ale.
Perfect.
A separate category. So kind of fun to start a company, create a product, and create a new beer style.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So, no, it's very nice. It's very inspiring, I think, for most of our home brewers that would see here this conversation.
Now,
But
so one other thing that is important,
yeah,
part of our discussion,
yeah,
and you guys out there who want to get in the business
Yeah.
or are in the business, a lot of breweries and brewers think I'm going to make the best beer on earth and it's going to sell itself. It doesn't work that way.
yeah,
One of the best things we talked about, again from the very beginning before we spent any money, we knew we had to sell to a distributor. So we asked ourselves, why would a distributor sales rep, when they're selling 100 or 200 other beers, why would they give a small new company any time?
yeah,
So every time we had a business issue dealing with somebody else on the other side of the table, whether it's the distributor or the retailer or whomever, we always try to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person to find out what will get them motivated to want to support us when financially they shouldn't.
yeah.
So we tried to come up with as many techniques as possible, and we had no money. So we have a term in the U.S. For a certain type of marketing. It's called guerrilla marketing. Not gorilla the animal,
Okay.
but the Spanish, well, maybe Portuguese too. The Spanish guerrilla is a fighter, the little fighter against the big army. How does a little brewery compete against the big brewery with no money? You come up with guerrilla marketing techniques to get your word out. So that's what we did. We tried to do whatever we could to be different, be interesting, without money, to get distributors or retailers to get behind us.
Perfect. Yeah. So, and that's the next point. Just a little bit about how the techniques that you develop to teach about beer, but being very simple and using the beer education in marketing.
Right.
So you had that landscape that you
Right.
maybe we can put in the image again.
You can do that.
Yeah.
So even though I wasn't president of the beer, that was fine. My name was on it. So I took the role as the outside person, being out with distributors, retailers, the media. That was my role. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. What do I do as the outside guy? I didn't know. So I went to different cities, and I'd first go to the distributor to thank them for selling our beer. Then I'd say, I'm here in your city for a day or two or three. What would you like me to do? And they'd say, go to restaurant A for lunch and thank them. Restaurant B for dinner, thank them. Go to bar C, D, and E and thank the bars in the evening. Just build a relationship. And I said, okay. But when I'd go to these places, I didn't want to identify myself as the founder of the company. I just want to see how they treated beer when you go in. And in the US and probably here too, you go into a restaurant, somebody puts you at a table, right? And the server comes over. What's the first thing a server asks you?
What do you want, or
what do you want to drink?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, what do you want to drink? Yeah. First time, yeah.
So I can't wait to hear the server say Pete's Wicked Ale. I can't wait. I'm just
yeah.
So I'd say, okay, I'd love a beer. What do you got?
Okay.
Just waiting for them to say Pete's Wicked Ale.
Yeah.
So I'd say, I'd like a beer. What do you got? And everywhere around the country, this is in the late 80s, in the early 90s, I heard the same thing. We have Bud Light, Miller Light, Coors Light.
Okay.
And so I think, why am I here? The distributor said they had my beer here. Why aren't they saying it?
It's our Sagres and Superboc here in Portugal, but basically. Yeah.
So I like to have fun with people, so I'd say, okay, I don't want those. Do you have anything with color, taste, or aroma?
Okay.
And they'd laugh. And then they'd say, hesitatingly, we have Pete's Wicked Ale, Sam Adams Boston Lager, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Okay.
And I'd say, interesting. If you had those, why didn't you mention them the first time? And
when we ask about beer, yeah.
And I have not that it matters, but I have an engineering degree and a master's degree. They didn't teach this in school. So I'd say, if you had them, why didn't you mention them? And again, the US is different. Servers get tips.
Yeah.
Usually 15%.
Yeah.
So what everybody would tell me was, if I mention that we had Pete's Wicked Ale, I know you've never heard of it, and that you're probably going to ask me, what does it taste like? Nobody's ever trained me. You don't have to train people on Bud, Miller, and Coors.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
Yeah.
But with the micro beers, they're all different, and there was no training. So rather than looking stupid, yeah, Pete's Wicked Ale, never heard of it? Tell me what it is. And you give me this, I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
So rather than looking stupid, they don't mention it. And I'm thinking to myself, we took all the time and money.
Okay.
We took all the time and money to create a company, to create a brand,
Yeah.
to create a product, and it gets all the way to a restaurant,
Yeah.
and they don't want to mention it.
They were shy to appear stupid because they doesn't know about beer. Okay.
Right. So
okay.
that was a fundamental. Oh my God, there's something wrong.
Yeah. Very nice input.
So I took it as a challenge to take on education, not just for Pete's, but for micro beer, craft beer in general. And one night I woke up at 2 a.m, had this idea, went to my computer and started playing with it. And I ended up creating a visual chart. You can find it on the internet, and you'll be showing it.
Maybe we can put it there. Yeah.
It's called Pete's Landscape of Beer, and you can look it up on the internet. But the idea of the beer chart is to have a visual representation of all beer, not just craft, but all beers, easy to understand, and it's designed so that you can understand it completely in under 10 minutes. It's simple, you can remember it, and by putting not just our beer on it, but all the beers, or the key beers in the market on the chart, you can visually see how your beer relates to another beer. Not good or bad, but just what makes your beer different.
Yep.
And for a customer, the customer can see what quadrant they like products, so they can look in that quadrant and find beers, and then to see individual competitive beers. One might be sweeter, one might be more bitter, and the consumer can make an intelligent decision what to order and probably have a higher probability of liking it. And that's the key. You want the customer to enjoy what they spend a lot of money on craft beer. You want them to have a good experience. And we also thought that it's, like I said, it's not just for us, it's for the industry. So we had another philosophical discussion. We can do whatever we can to try to have Pete's Brewing Company succeed. And we all wanted that, but we also felt philosophically that we need the micro beer industry to succeed. If it succeeds, then our chance of success is that much better.
Perfect.
So we have a phrase,
Perfect.
A rising tide raises all ships. So we wanted the micro beer industry, the craft beer industry to rise, and then we can hopefully rise faster.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of this education wasn't just for our company, but to educate the public in general about all beers and craft beers. And that education was phenomenally successful. I probably trained, I don't know, 25,000, 50,000 people in the course of the years. Our salespeople did similar training. Matter of fact, let me give you another thing that we did that we felt was really important. When we were hiring people, you interview, you have an opening, you have a person interviewing for it, and you find the best person for the job. When the job offer went out, we used real mail back then.
Yeah. Physical.
Besides the offer letter, I sent out 3 beer books and a beer test. And we told the new employees, between now and when you start, look at the test, go through the books, because your first day in the office, you have to take the test and pass.
Okay.
And the feedback we got was, everybody bitched and moaned, and why are you making us do that? But after they took it, they realized it. The idea behind that was, you're not going to a job. You're going to a beer company. If you're going to be part of a beer company, there's always going to be the possibility of your being out in the market and saying, I work for Pete's Brewing Company. You might get a question. Do you want to be embarrassed by not being able to answer the question? Or do you want to confidently say, oh, I can answer that? We wanted you to believe you were the beer company, so damn it, you got to pass this test. Now, it was open book, it didn't matter, but we wanted you to know the key questions, where to look for the answers, and like I said, people hated it until they took it, and then they understood.
Okay.
And then their confidence got that much better.
Yeah.
So I did the training on the education, but our sales force was really behind it too, because they had relatively good training. So if you're hiring people in your brewery, whether they're the head brewer or the receptionist, it doesn't matter. Have them trained on beer.
You understand what he's saying, you know? Yeah, me here in Nortada, this is my role here, is to train people about beer culture, because we are in a beer business, and we are not so, we're the craft beer movement that has 12 years old here in Portugal. Like we are very new in this kind of thing. So it has so many myths and so many misunderstandings about beer that we have. Normally, maybe very close where in the early 19s in the US.
Right.
So
Any employee that has dealings with the public, whether at the bar or out on sales, if they're not prepared to even answer simple questions like, okay, what's the difference between an ale and a lager? But tell me in terms of a drinker. I don't care whether it's top fermented or bottom fermented. That doesn't mean anything to me. I don't give a shit about that. As a drinker, how do I know whether I'm drinking an ale or not? So you got to educate and simplify so people can understand.
perfect. Educate and simplify. Let's highlight this. Perfect. So Pete, before we get to the final here, thank you very much for your precious time here.
It's going to cost you a T-shirt after all.
Yeah. Okay. We can manage this. Yeah, it's very fine. So we're going to this final question here. So here you're making a project with you to make a beer here in Nortada.
Right.
Would you like to talk just a little bit about the beer that we're making here?
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah. So I'm friends with Marcos, who works here.
Yeah.
I told him I was going to visit a friend in Lisbon, and he said, "Oh, would you come up to Porto to work on a collaboration?" I said, "Yeah, I love to do collaborations." So Marcos proposed an idea of a beer style called California Common. That's what Anchor Steam Beer is. The origins of that style come from the mid-1800s. They discovered gold in 1849 in the mountains just east of San Francisco. Tens of thousands of people came to California looking for a fortune. Turns out the miners didn't make the fortunes. It was all the suppliers of goods to the miners that made the fortunes. But brewers came out, but there was no ice. There was no refrigeration. So this beer style was basically German brewers coming out to California with lager yeast, but not refrigerated temperatures, more ambient temperatures, 50s in Fahrenheit, 50s, 60s, that type of ambient temperature.
Yeah.
So California Common is basically a lager, a bottom fermented yeast, fermented at an ale temperature.
Yeah.
So when Marcos said that, I said, that's cool. I don't happen to like the main hop in a California Common, but there's always other hops to use. But then when I got here today, I thought, I hate doing what other people do. Yeah, I don't want to copy somebody else's beer. Let's do a twist on it. And it turns out, for those of you who may not be familiar, there's a beer style called West Coast IPA and West Coast Pale Ale. I live on the West Coast. In the last 5 years or so, the brewers on the West Coast wanted beers that were easier to drink, and beers that you can drink more than one. And the typical IPA or West Coast IPA or West Coast Pale Ale fill you up. So the style has changed in the last 5 years from maybe a color like this to using malts that give a light yellow color. The fermentation technique used is to ferment all the way down so there's no residual sugar, so it's very dry, and then have hopping that is kind of balanced with the dryness of the beer. But the color-wise, this is a traditional color of a pale ale or an IPA. Now they're golden. So the twist we're doing with this one is to make a California Common, but in a new version, just like West Coast IPA and West Coast Pale Ale have changed to this lighter, drier version. So we're making a California Common, contemporary California Common.
Yeah, okay. So in a few months, or more or less, we are going to taste this beer, and here in Nortada, in other places. So I would like to thank you very much, Pete.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah. Oops, I have to put just a little bit here to make the toast, a final toast with you here. So it was a pleasure. Thank you very much, Pete.
Thank you
for your time.
Just one final thing. I have to
Yeah,
repeat
for sure.
this. If you're going to go in the beer business, please, 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 There's no magic to the number I'm going to say, but it's indicative. If you're getting into the beer business, everybody wants to focus on making great beer, and you should. A great beer is a minimum. So like if you know cards, poker, you're sort of like, when you put the money in the middle, it's called an ante.
Yeah.
So nowadays, if your beer isn't great, you're in trouble. But having great beer is only the ante to getting in the business. So I like to say making the beer is only 10% of the problems you're going to encounter. There are so many other issues. So don't think that the only thing that's going to give you problems is making the beer. You have 90% other problems that you're going to have to anticipate and work on. But they're solvable. Just expand your mind and always put yourself in the chair of the other person you're talking to. On that, cheers.
Cheers, my friends. Thank you very much. Muito obrigado. Até a próxima Conversa aos Pairings. Saúde a todos vocês. Obrigado. Cheers. Now let's do the photo to the. Let's do the photo to put in the thumbnail of the video.
Falta dizer o saúde.
Ah, pronto. Grava só um saúde, então.
Saúde.
Posso? Saúde.
Saúde.